The targets are set. It may seem distant, but it's not. Is it an unattainable goal? Well, the question is valid, but there's only one answer. Countries around the world are striving to reach this goal, but accomplishing this is not without challenges. And for some, these challenges are even more complex. Tackling infectious diseases is central to achieving most, if not all, sustainable development goals. Controlling infectious diseases necessitates effective interventions for detection, prevention, and treatment. While the journey ahead is lengthy and filled with obstacles, it is also true that significant progress has been made in Africa, particularly in addressing the deadliest infections prevalent on the continent.
Malaria has been around longer than we have been human beings. And what's very likely is that it's worked out in very clever ways, literally living in our blood. But it's beginning to look realistic when people say we should be eradicating malaria in the 2030s. Maybe not by 2030 itself, but some years after that, if there were adequate resource and adequate political will, I really think that malaria can be eradicated in our lifetimes.
The individual who brings this hopeful outlook is Professor Adrian Hill, the director of the Jenner Institute in the UK that presents a new malaria vaccine as a potential breakthrough.
It's been really, really difficult to devise a way of making a highly effective vaccine, but that's what we think we now have. Recently, we've been working in Mali and in Uganda with very experienced clinical trials teams who have been key to the success of this vaccine. And what we were able to show 3 years ago is that the efficacy of this vaccine in young children in West Africa is over 75%. And that was a real milestone in the field, encouraged us to move forward towards a definitive licensure trial that will allow the vaccine to be registered by regulators and by WHO and others. And that's what's happening right now. But already 3 states in Africa, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and Ghana, have licensed it for use in their countries. And that's a real signal, I think, to show that this is a vaccine that African authorities are very keen to have, and it could really have a big impact.
There are more than 10 partners involved in this research, spanning from the UK to France and from Sweden to Burkina Faso, Nigeria and Kenya, just to mention some of them.
There are about 40 million children born each year who might benefit from a malaria vaccine. That's a lot to manufacture. But one of our big advantages of working with the Serum Institute of India, who are the largest vaccine supplier to Africa, is that they have that capacity and they have a plan to provide 100 to 200 million doses of this malaria vaccine as soon as it's generally available.
Malaria is not the only disease which science has taken significant strides forward. There has also been substantial advancements in the field of HIV. It's the case of the CAPRISA team, whose partners in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Uganda, the Netherlands, and the UK have been working together for more than a decade. I spoke with Professor Diana D. Gibb from the University College London.
The CAPRISA projects particularly focused on getting good formulations, baby pills for children in resource-limited settings where liquids are really not a good way of giving medicines. So CAPRISA 1, CAPRISA 2 and CAPRISA 3 were very focused on the best formulations for young children for treating HIV. The most recent trial, CAPRISA 4, which is the largest one, nearly 1,000 children, was really looking at the best treatments for children who've already failed one lot of treatment. This trial was looking at all the different alternatives, and it really produced some very nice results, which we already have had a meeting with WHO about how these might go into guidelines.
The study's findings will also help simplify dosing and develop easier-to-take medication formulations for children with HIV.
We have worked across a number of different African countries, obviously with collaborators there who are real experts in the world of children with HIV. When you have an interdisciplinary teams working together, they definitely inspire each other, and that's where new ideas come from as well.
Individuals with HIV may also be susceptible to other diseases that can further compromise the immune system. The Ambition CM study introduced a simplified treatment for cryptococcal meningitis, a significant contributor to mortality in people with HIV. The study's results have influenced WHO guidelines, making this treatment option more accessible in poor resource settings. Malaria and HIV are not the only diseases affecting the African population.
So in Africa, there are more than 240 million people that are infected with schistosomiasis, and more than 700 million people are at risk to get the disease. These are worms circulating through a vector, which is a snail. And as soon as someone goes into the water, this person can get infected. Based on this, it hits Africans' most vulnerable people, especially women, because they have a lot to do with the water, and together with them, it's also their children.
Meet Dr. Jutta Reinhard-Rupp, the head of the Global Health Institute at Merck, based in Switzerland.
For this disease, we have a treatment that has been known for decades. It's a treatment that is available to treat children from the age of 6 years up to adult age. Till now, there is a part of the population that cannot benefit from the treatment. And I'm talking about children under the age of 6 years. And they are also highly at risk to get infected. So for this reason, we decided in 2012 to put together a public-private partnership to develop a child-friendly formulation.
Jutta is talking about the pediatric praziquantel consortium that aims to treat the 50 million preschool-aged children that currently lack adequate treatment for schistosomiasis. And it's not just research, it's almost ready to become a real treatment.
The current tablets are not suitable for younger children. They are too big, and this opens the risk of choking. And also, what is important, we do not know the correct dose for younger children. Now, with this new treatment, we have smaller tablets, and these are easily to be dissolved in water. We submitted all our results in a dossier to the European medicine agencies, and we are waiting for their final feedback by the end of this year.
So perhaps it's not as fast as we expected, but indeed there is hope on the horizon. Investing in health research can not only lead to longer, healthier lives, but it can also be a catalyst for economical and social development, enabling countries to achieve wider sustainable development goals.
The immediate step is to get this vaccine approved by the WHO and distributed in many countries in Africa to vaccinate young children, meaning infants, so that we can save as many lives as possible in the next few years.
I think it's absolutely correct and true that collaborative working and capacity strengthening is needed to bring to bear, to drive things forward and make the world a better place.
So a very good morning, everybody. I hope you are in top shape, and I still see some flocking in coming from, as we understand, from the EDCTP 3 session. And I would like to welcome you all for this plenary session, and it's very good that you had an introduction to EDCTP 3 this morning. Do you know now how to continue and keep the momentum of our EDCTP movement? I would like now to start with the plenary session. It's my huge pleasure really to introduce to you Professor Salim Abdool Karim from CAPRISA. I don't think we have, after the introduction yesterday, we have to talk again and explain what CAPRISA is. I think everybody has it now nailed down with this wonderful award that we could present yesterday. So congratulations again to CAPRISA, and welcome Professor Salim Abdool Karim. And the idea is that after his talk there is also time for questions. So it's not just a talk and we leave it, but it is really also in the spirit of the title, where we want to have lessons learned from COVID, and I hope that we really learn. I mean, we have been in meetings of lessons learned after Ebola, and then came Corona, and it seemed that the world has forgotten what we learned, even that we went to many of these sessions of lessons learned after Ebola. But here we have somebody who has really lessons to tell us. Salim, welcome.
Thank you very much, Marcel. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be with all of you here today. When I was asked to do this presentation, Yazdan and Michael asked me to talk about the essence of excellence and how in Africa we are positioned, and how EDCTP is contributing to positioning us for excellence. So it's my great honor to be here with you this morning to share that with you. And I'll talk about two specific activities. The first is the EDCTP CAPRISA 012 study, which is about broadly neutralizing antibodies to prevent HIV. And I'm going to talk about some of the COVID contributions before I focus on how can we in Africa make a difference? How can we impact policy? How can we make a difference in terms of what is the programs and the policies that drive healthcare and prevention and global health, particularly in Africa, but globally as well. And then I'll end off with 5 lessons that I think we can take away from what we have done in COVID, what we have done in HIV. So let's start with HIV. We have seen how globally, and particularly in Africa, we have done incredibly well in rolling out treatment. Through the Global Fund, through PEPFAR, through UNITAID, there's a range of programs that have enabled us to provide antiretroviral treatment even in the most remote village in Africa. And so that's one of our success stories. However, that job is not yet done. There are still millions that we need to reach in order to provide them with treatment. But while we have a success story in treatment, we are unfortunately seriously lagging in terms of prevention. We had set at a global level the target of 500,000 new cases as the goal, the threshold for 2020. In reality, in 2020, the number of new cases was 3 times that number. We are clearly off target. And if we look at the most recent data for 2022, we have 1.3 million new infections. And of those infections, Sub-Saharan Africa hosts about 50% of the global burden of HIV and about half of all the new infections that are occurring. And within sub-Saharan Africa, adolescent girls and young women bear the brunt of the HIV pandemic. So much so that when you take young boys and girls below the age of 24, we see almost a fourfold difference in several hyper-endemic communities. So we have a challenge, and that challenge is evident when you look at some of these data. So let's look at a study that my wife undertook. Now, I will continually use we. You know, we did this, we did that. You need to know it's a royal we. In that, actually, most of that work is done by my wife. And unfortunately, she's in the US, so she couldn't be here to do this presentation. So I'm not quite a stand-in, but consider me the stand-in. So I'm going to share a lot of the research that we have done within the CAPRISA team, led often by Croatia. So this is one of those studies. So this is a study looking at HIV prevalence in several schools in one of the highest burden districts in South Africa. And what this shows you across in grade 9 and 10 students, across the different ages, the prevalence of HIV in young boys ranges from about 1% to about 1.8%. So what we are seeing in this hyper-endemic community is a situation of low prevalence in the boys compared to the girls. Because when you look at the girls, already by age 15, the prevalence is 2.6%. When you get to the 18 and 19-year-olds, we're talking about 1 out of 8 that's infected. And when you're talking about the over 20-year-olds, we are now at 1 out of 4 girls. Just think about this. 1 out of 4 grade 9 and 10 girls above the age of 20 are already infected with HIV. So clearly, we need to be doing something about this. And we've been focusing on this challenge for over 30 years when we first described these higher rates in women. And we've done study after study after study, and we failed. We failed over 18 years so many times that we were often referred to as the experts in failure. Failure was part of what we did. And in the world of HIV prevention, particularly in young women, because the challenge is so great and the need is so great, a lot of that failure was in the public eye. So everybody knows when we have a negative result and a result that doesn't show that the products work. And that changed. That changed in 2010 when we announced the results of the tenofovir gel study at the AIDS conference. And that just provided us with proof of concept that antiretrovirals can prevent sexual transmission of HIV. And there were several studies that were underway that showed that oral tenofovir was highly effective in preventing HIV infection. And so eventually, the WHO led to a recommendation in 2015 for the use of oral PrEP as a standard of care in HIV prevention, which today we all take for granted some 8 years later. But it took a long time to get to that point. And in South Africa, we eventually implemented it in 2017. But now that we've been implementing it for several years, we've seen its limitations. It's a real challenge when you're talking about young people who are risk takers fundamentally, and they don't have HIV, and we are asking them to take a tablet every day. It's really a challenge. And what we find is our uptake is low, and those who do start treatment, we lose about 1/3 of them stop taking the drugs within 3 months. And by the end of the first year, we've lost 2/3 of them. So we've got to do better. We've got to find a PrEP technology that would be easier for them to use, one that they could literally forget about, not have to think about taking a tablet every day. And so here comes the EDCTP's CAPRISA 012 project. And here what we're trying to do is we are trying to develop a PrEP option, in our case particularly focused on women, but would be available to anybody who wants to use PrEP, as a 6-monthly injectable. So that's the idea. So how are we doing that? So we enrolled a patient back in 2004. She was the 256th patient that we enrolled. And this was in a study where we were trying to look at what were the risk factors for HIV in young women. Why were they getting infected at such high rates? When she was enrolled, she was HIV negative. And in the course of the study, while she was under observation, was receiving all of the different prevention technologies and counseling, she became HIV positive. And following that, we have been observing her, collecting her bloods and so on. And when she qualified for antiretroviral therapy, she was initiated on ART. And to this day, she remains at our clinic, and she's been quite well over the last several years. One of the things that happened in 2010 is 2 groups in the US, one at the VRC and one at Scripps. They described for the first time something called broadly neutralizing antibodies. Now, when a person gets infected with HIV, naturally, they would produce an antibody, as you would see with any viral infection. The problem in HIV is that the antibody that's produced is strain specific. That antibody will only kill the infecting virus. And because HIV is rapidly evolving, what happens is that the antibody, when it does emerge, which takes about 6 to 8 weeks, is no longer effective against the virus that's circulating. So we have this mismatch. It's one of the reasons why we do an antibody test to say if somebody has HIV. Normally, you either have the virus or the antibody, not both. So here's a situation that in an infection, normally a person would produce a strain-specific antibody. But these 2 groups in 2010 showed us that there are these rare individuals who produce antibodies that actually can kill a wide range of HIV. And they use the term broadly neutralizing antibody. So we screened thousands of our patients to see if any of them developed this broadly neutralizing antibody. And in the course of that, we discovered that CAPRISA 256 does so. We took her serum and we tested it against 400 viruses from throughout the world, from Europe, from Africa, from North America, from Russia, from everywhere. And what we found is that the antibodies in her blood kill 4 out of every 5 viruses. We were just stunned that her antibody can do that. But we also noticed something unusual about that antibody. And what we noticed was that it seemed to have a high level of potency. It seemed to be even small quantities of the antibody were killing the virus. And so the next task was, how do we make this antibody? Well, the challenge was we have to find the cell. Now, if you remember from your high school biology, that in your blood you've got white blood cells and red blood cells and so on, well, one of the cells we're targeting, we're trying to find the B cell, the B lymphocyte that makes this antibody. And each B lymphocyte makes a specific antibody and no other antibody. So quite literally, we are trying to find 1 in 10,000 B cells that makes this particular antibody. So we asked one of our PhD students, to go to the VRC at the NIH and work with them to see if we can find this B cell. We didn't have much hope, I have to tell you. We thought it was a bridge too far to try and find 1 out of 10,000 cells. And so we gave her a 3-month scholarship, said, go and see what can be done. And just before she had to come back, we got the call. I found the cell. She found the B cell that makes this antibody. Using a baiting technique that Nicole Doria-Rose had been developing and was using at the VRC, she managed to find that one cell. We took it into our lab, cloned it, and it took us several months, or over 7 months, to make the first 3 grams of this antibody. So now we can do it in the lab. So we sent those 3 grams of antibody to our friend Dan Baruch, who's at Harvard University, and we asked him, can you put it into monkeys and tell us, does it prevent HIV infection or the monkey equivalent of HIV HIV? And so that's what he did. In this study that he did, he showed, and he did it as a randomized trial, that monkeys he injected with placebo all became infected. So that's the placebo control. So all of the monkeys that received the placebo became infected. The monkeys that received CAPRISA 256, regardless of the dose, and you can see those are escalating doses, that not one became infected. In fact, to this day, we've not been able to infect a monkey that has received even low doses of CAPRISA 256 antibodies. And so now we know, at least conceptually in monkeys, we have an antibody that works. The challenge is, how do we actually take it from that into a product? And so there, Croatia and I go off to Bethesda to meet with Dr. Tony Fauci, and we share with him these results. And we partnered with the NIH to manufacture these antibodies, and so they did. And in manufacturing those antibodies, we now needed to do the clinical trials. Here comes EDCTP. And so the EDCTP project is born as a partnership involving the NIH making the antibodies, the EDCTP that's funding the trial, and the South African government that provided additional funding. Here we are doing this trial. So we did the first in-human trial and showed that the product is safe. We've now done the PK studies that show that the antibody together with VRC07 can last up to 6 months at therapeutic levels. So we now have a product that we can inject, and it would last and provide therapeutic levels for 6 months. So here's a 6-monthly injectable PrEP option. Does it work? Does it prevent HIV in women? Does it prevent HIV in men? Well, we don't know that answer because that study is currently underway. So that's the EDCTP 012 study that's assessing whether this combination of 2 antibodies can prevent HIV, because we need to change that situation. We can't continue lagging in HIV prevention. So when you look at this 20-year story, from the time we first enrolled CAPRISA 256, that's her code name, to today when we are doing that trial, that's a 20-year story, taking it from the patient in the clinic into the lab, identifying the antibodies, manufacturing it, now back in the clinic, testing it, hoping one day that this antibody does work and that we might be able to use it to prevent CAPRISA 256 daughters from getting infected. So that's the challenge that we face. That's the prospect that we hope to show through the EDCTP CAPRISA 012 project. Let me talk now about COVID. Let's shift gears. Another pandemic. Given you a full dose of HIV, let's talk about COVID. One of the things is that the CAPRISA EDCTP project had to be put on hold or had to be slowed quite a bit when COVID came around. And so we had some spare capacity to work on COVID. And so we did. And among the things that I'm just going to give you, in the course of the last 3 years of COVID, we've published over 100 papers, 30 or 40 of them in the top 4 journals. So I'm not going to go through all of that. I'll just give you a sampling. So one of the things we needed to know very early on, because the team in Durban at CRISP described the first variant. Now we know it as the beta variant, but it was at that time we labeled it the 512YV2 variant. And all of us needed to understand, so what do these variants do? Why are they important? What are the implications? And so we published this paper very early on in the NAJM, trying to capture what is it that these variants mean. And we knew that the variants had now changed our endgame. So originally, we have a virus, okay, now we have a vaccine, end of pandemic. Well, that picture quickly changed once we realized that we had variants. And we needed to understand that better. We needed to appreciate what these variants were doing very early on, because it was, we were just scared of what's going to happen now. We're going to face a completely new pandemic. And so we needed to understand many issues. And one of the key challenges is, what's our end game? What's our plan? How do we get out of this? And so we initiated several activities under the International Science Council, colleagues in France and across the world. We were trying to put this together to try and understand this better. And one of the things we did is we started a collaboration to start understanding this. What is the impact of the genomic variations, the immunological, and published several papers that looked at how the response was changing, how the immune response was changing as the virus was evolving. But one of the big things we were concerned about, would the diagnostic test still work? And so we partnered with the ACT Accelerator to test, to assess new diagnostic tests as they were emerging. And so we did several of them, looking at how these tests performed as new variants emerged. And these were partnerships that we were undertaking with several colleagues across the world, together with partnering with FIND. And we undertook several vaccine trials. Undertook trials with the J&J vaccine, with the Pfizer vaccine, and we just finished now one of the trials with the Moderna vaccine, finished follow-up. So undertaking COVID vaccine trials is very much part and parcel of what we did. And part of this is because that infrastructure already exists. It was built originally through funding from the South African government, from the US government, and also from the European Union. So you can see how all of these have come together to make a big difference. So let me end this section telling you about one little thing. That when Professor De Oliveira and his team first announced the Omicron variant, I was, inundated with interviews and commenting on it and so on. And the next morning, I was a few days later, I think it was, because we announced it on a Friday. I get an email from the editor-in-chief of The Lancet, and he says, Slim, you're everywhere here, on Sky, on BBC, talking about this Omicron. We need to share this with the scientific community. What data do you have? Can we share? And we looked at it and we said, well, there's not much we have, but we do know something about how it's spreading. And so we undertook this task. And we wrote this article in less than a day. From the time we received his email, we had our statisticians working flat out to produce the graphs that showed the doubling time. And Croatia and I, when our 2 officers put up do not disturb signs, and we said, we've got to write this paper. And so we wrote it, and at 4:30 that afternoon, we submitted it to The Lancet. Within an hour, we got the reviews back. We took 45 minutes to address all the review queries, And that evening, this article went up live. It is now one of our most cited articles, over 1,000 citations already. And why was it important? It was important because people needed to know what is going on with this new variant. And what we showed them is, if you look at the red line, the really fast doubling time, that this was going to spread faster than anything else that they have seen. But that didn't end there, because we hinted that it might be less severe. But a few days later, we published this piece as a preprint showing that even though more people were getting infected with Omicron, the proportion that was admitted to hospital was lower, the proportion requiring oxygen was lower, the proportion that was severe was lower, and so we were providing the essential clinical evidence together with the epidemiology to help people plan and be ready to deal with Omicron as it went through the world. And it took us several weeks later where we answered the question everybody wanted to know and produced, this comes from Alex Segal's lab, who is on the floor above us at the medical school in Durban. And he showed quite clearly that Omicron escapes antibodies from vaccination. In particular, he studied patients who had received the Pfizer vaccine. And so what we were doing was using the existing capabilities to answer critical questions. What's the epidemiology? Is it spreading faster? Is it more severe? No. Does it evade antibodies? Yes. And this is eventually what led to the recommendations, and there were studies showing that if you gave a booster dose, that you shot the levels of antibodies up, and so that's what led to that recommendation in response to BA1 and BA2. So let me touch very briefly on contributing to policy. And here, it's quite important that for African scientists to have a seat at the table, to be involved in the critical places where discussions on global health policy are occurring. And so I'm just going to give you some examples, and I'm not even going to read them to you. You can read them for yourself, but whether it's at the WHO Science Council or my role as special advisor on pandemics to Dr. Tedros, or whether it's advising the executive director of UNAIDS or chairing the UNAIDS expert panel, it's about making research evidence available to policymakers. And that's a critical part of what we do. It's not just about the science, it's about making that impact. And here, I'm giving you an example of how when UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called the high-level meeting on AIDS, where all countries came into New York with their delegations to eventually make a decision about what our goal is going to be at a global level. And UNAIDS asked Croatia and I to host the session, the scientific session, that provided the scientific rationale and the evidence to guide the global goal. So what do we want to try and achieve by 2030? And so we did that, and you can see in the session, myself, Tony Fauci, Diane Havler, Michelle Sedebe, and Croatia. So we were trying to do this to give a global sense of where we can get to. What does the evidence point to? And just one example of how science can feed into this process. And then stop in HIV. Here in COVID, I mean, we were advising dozens of countries. I'm just giving you two examples of sessions and briefings that we did for US Congress, for the UK Parliament's all-parliamentary group on coronavirus. And everybody wants to know about, what do we do about variants? What's our end game? What do we need to do now to get us faster to our end game? And so that's the kind of way in which we've used our science. So let me end off with the 5 key lessons that we can take away from HIV, from COVID, and other infectious diseases. And how do we position Africa for research excellence? So the first is that you cannot do that unless you innovate. I want to say that it's important that we support people who are innovating and developing products to test their products in Africa. That's important, but it's not enough. If that's all you're doing, then you're simply a collector of specimens and patients. That's not what science is. Science is about the intellectual endeavor of generating new ideas, new solutions. And that's what we should be doing. And I have known of no better program than EDCTP to do that, because it creates that partnership of equality. And so we have to be doing more of the innovating, not just the clinical trials, but generating the products that go into those clinical trials, generating the ideas, generating the strategies that go into those clinical trials. And I showed you the 20-year journey of CAPRISA 256 as one such example. But excellence is never done alone. Excellence is about global partnerships. It's about collaborations. And here I'm just giving you some idea about the hundreds of collaborations that we have. I mean, just CAPRISA 012 itself has almost 200 different collaborators across all continents. That's how science is done. And it's led by scientists in Africa. And if you want to achieve excellence, you've got to be able to sustain it. And the way we sustain it is by training and treasuring the next generation, creating the opportunities, enabling them to rise to even greater heights. And the fourth is that he who pays the piper calls the tune. We will never succeed if we are always dependent on external funding. We have to find ways in which our countries become contributors and not always standing out there with the begging bowl. And it's our job to advocate to our own governments to put more money into science as part of developing Africa. And fifthly, make a difference. Generate evidence that will impact health policy and change global health. And here, I've given you just a piece we wrote in Nature that just captures that. So let me end off with just quoting Plato. Excellence is not a gift, but a skill that takes practice. You have to do it over and over and over till you get it right. And we, in our generation, are fortunate that EDCTP is the gift. It's a gift that enables us. It enables the research and the skills development that's needed for us to achieve scientific excellence in Africa. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, Salim. This is really not just a wonderful start of the day, but I think, as you said, we now just have to learn. And in the every daily action to translate this into practice, what you have elegantly and convincingly brought to us. Wonderful. This and a huge contribution also, not only to science, but mainly to this dialogue between science and policy and science and society. I think if we take this all, we will even get more momentum to move ahead. So thank you very much. The idea is now that we have a short question and answer session. We don't sit into these places here. We are actually, as you can see, Salim, we are more up to just run around and answer the question. So who would like to make a start? Or is everything crystal clear? Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Salim, for this highly inspiring lecture. You mentioned that you failed many times, and you found faith in failure. But comparing your generation to our own generation, thank God we have EDCTP. So how do you marry or situate the recurrent or persistent failure, and with a kind of government which does not consider research funding a priority, and there's high competition to attract funding, for example, for EDCTP. How do you continue, how do you persist or persevere in continuously failing and failing and failing? I've heard several times you mentioned that you failed 99 times, and in the 100th time that you succeeded. So can we actually continue to fail? And there's no support from the in-country funding. How do we sort of toe your footpaths? Persistent failing, no relenting, and no support from either the in-country government, EDCTP, highly competitive to achieve. So please, can you share your thoughts about it? Thank you very much again.
No, I think this question you answer, and then we move on. And we just try, don't make too many statements, ask questions, because then actually we get a precise answer. Otherwise, we continue the lecture the whole day, you see.
So if your plan in your research is to succeed in every clinical trial, to succeed in every initiative, then you are not being risky enough. You are doing research that's mostly me too. It's mostly when you know more or less it's going to work, so you're repeating it. You're not pushing the envelope. If you push the envelope, you will fail. And you will fail multiple times. Hopefully not as badly as us. It took 18 years of failure in our case. Hopefully you'll achieve success faster than that. But failure is really important. Failure teaches you about what is not working. It teaches you about what to do next and what to avoid when you start again. If you don't learn from your failure, you will simply repeat those same mistakes. So it's a very important part of it. The question is, in today's scientific environment, can we afford to keep failing? Is there a road that allows us to do that? And the answer to that is yes. Unfortunately, I have seen how the world has moved towards instant gratification in social media and so on. People want to get success straight away. That just doesn't work. I don't know where somebody undertakes their first study and gets a major success. If that happens, good luck to them. Mostly, it takes hard work. It takes multiple efforts, multiple partnerships. And you have to convince your funders to stay the course. You have to convince your funders by writing grants that show that from each failure, you have the ability to do some amazing science that will help you understand that failure and take you one step further to success. And that's what we did. I mean, I didn't share with you it's over, what, 100, 200 papers that we have published about what we have learned from each failure. We describe how genital inflammation increases risk of HIV. We showed how Gardnerella metabolizes tenofovir in the vagina. We showed so many things. And our funders want to know that because they want to solve the problem and they don't want to repeat the mistakes. And so that's what you have to do. You have to sell to your funders that you are learning from your failure. And if you can do that successfully, they'll stay with you, as they did with us.
Thank you very much. And the thing to take home is not make propaganda, but pursue science and use communication. And I think in the recent past, because we have to fight for funding, many people just work with the propaganda line and information. We actually do communication, that carries us further and is an answer to how we have to work. Now, I see two other dear colleagues, a short question for a short answer, because we must move. There is still something very interesting to come.
Thank you so
yes,
much.
you can go the other side, yeah? Oh. So we switch over. The ladies' side, I mean, this is very interesting how you split. Please,
Good
short.
morning. Yes, Jutta Reinhardrup from Merck, great, brilliant keynote lecture. My very precise question is about your patient 256. How is she going to benefit from a potential success of your program?
So CAPRISA 256 is fully aware of everything that we've been doing. The antibody itself we are studying is not quite hers anymore because it's been manipulated and changed in its genetic sequence quite a bit to make it better. I mean, her antibody was already close to a Mercedes-Benz level quality, but we wanted Rolls-Royce, so we had to make several genetic changes. And we have a patent on the sequence, on the antibody, not the sequence, but the antibody. And we have a philosophy at CAPRISA that we believe knowledge belongs to all of us. We were just the ones to uncover it and make it available, but that belongs to us, belongs to the world. And so we don't believe in profiteering from our patents. So our goal, if we can ever move this to eventually being a product, and we've just partnered with one of the big pharmaceutical generic companies in India to do this, is that if we get it to a product, the idea is to make it available at an access price, where nobody is profiteering, but that we achieve the goal that we set out to. We didn't set out with a goal to make money. We set out with the goal to stop an epidemic. And if that's what we achieve, she will join us in that celebration.
Thank you very much, Salim. We just also had from an online participant a question if she is still alive and is aware of all that's happening. You have answered that one.
Yes.
And it also came the question of ownership on the patent, and also you have very nicely answered how this has to be seen. And I think this is, with this, Matthew, who asked the question, I think this is clarified. Matthew had also another question on the general context of prevention in HIV, but we don't go now into the HIV prevention session. But of course, you never look just at this very case of the girls in being infected, but the whole context in which it occurs. So we switch to the male side again for a quick question, but then we really have to stop because, yes.
Thank you so much. Great talk. I'm wondering about innovation ecosystem. You made a great point regarding having new ideas and innovations from Africa. So what's your comment about the innovation ecosystem, nurturing new ideas and innovations? I think we are not in short of innovations. Rather, the level is not, the land is not level enough to support. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common problem that innovation, because it has a valley of death, where you've got many ideas and most of them will simply die. They will not succeed. And you've got to find funders that are willing to do that, willing to fund you to explore ideas. It's often a challenge. South Africa has a fund that's provided by the government. In fact, it's even called the Innovation Fund, to actually fund these high-risk projects. They'll give you some seed funding, test your idea, and if you meet some milestones, then they'll consider funding you more, but otherwise it's a valley of death. It'll die. So we have that, and that's, we're fortunate in that respect. But you're right, in many countries that's a problem. I mean, right now, CAPRISA 256, we are testing for prevention, but it's also being tested as a cure. You're going to hear from Gabriela how it's being studied in children, both for prevention and for reducing the reservoir. We ourselves, and because we know how CAPRISA 256, the antibody, was created in this patient, we now know what it will take for a human to get this antibody. So instead of giving them the antibody, can we make a series of vaccines that can emulate it and essentially become a vaccine against HIV? If the antibody works, then we can inject an immunogen or a set of immunogens to lead to it. So that's all part of these explorations. So all of them are high risk. And part of this is that if you are addressing a problem that needs a solution, then risk becomes an acceptable part of that process. Because if you're going for something that's easy, something that's going to succeed, then who's interested in that? You already know the answer. You want to be doing research where you don't know, you genuinely can fail. And in that respect, we have to convince the research administrators in our individual countries. We have to convince Michael Makanga sitting here to fund this high-risk research. If he wants us to innovate, we've got to get our governments to support that, because if they don't support it, then whoever does will own it.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Salim. And I think we cannot continue with the question of answers, because I look at the time. I was reminded by our dear organizers. And, but you got a lot of stimuli. I'm very sorry for those lined up. But I think what we take home also is that you cannot plan innovation. You must create the atmosphere where innovation can happen. And with CAPRISA and all their huge network, actually you have seen, and what also a little part of the EDCTP, we are this atmosphere where innovation can happen, and we pursue, as you have elegantly shown us. So congratulations again. Thank you very much. And you can always ask Salim in the break, and there are special sessions where these things will be discussed. Not yet the end. Let's move on. And it's my great pleasure now to move on. It's a great pleasure now to move on with another award. And what could be a better moment to have an award for the best team performance? And I think this is something which fits very well of all what we learned from Salim. And I have the huge pleasure to introduce now Professor Hannah Okufu, whom you know very well. I mean, it's very often said now she is retired, but she is not tired, as you know, see very well. And she is very well known from the Swedish SIDA, the agency, but I think it's not just a civil servant, but has really been engaged at all levels of really working with global health. And dear Hannah, would you please come up and present this award?
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, or are we in the afternoon? I have no idea. I have the pleasure to be able to introduce the Outstanding Research Team Prize Award, and a lot of, I have to find where I am, yes. And the award is, gosh, now you see my age. The Outstanding Research Prize Award is given for research teams in Sub-Saharan Africa and who are in Europe working on HIV, tuberculosis, malaria, and neglected infectious diseases. And the prize winner of this, I keep it short. The prize winner is the Health Research Unit, Zimbabwe, through ZIM. It's a biomedical research and training institute in Zimbabwe, and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the UK, represented by team leads Rashid Farad and Katarina Kranz, along with Nyasha Javakakwa, and please, if I don't say your name well, catch me and tell me off. And Madi Kudza Temb, who will accept the award in person on behalf of the team. So, wait, I can't see now. What? Ah, a video. Then I can move away and not be seen.
ThruZim stands for the Health Research Unit Zimbabwe. It's embedded within Biomedical Research and Training Institute, which is a not-for-profit research institution in Zimbabwe.
We have a team of about 100 people here in Zimbabwe, people who are part of the research teams. We have also a whole unit which is research support, such as financial administration support and the data management team.
The remit of ThruZim is to conduct research that addresses the most pertinent and relevant public health issues confronting Zimbabwe and the region.
We work across the life course, so we have some research studies which are focused on neonates, but we also have quite a big part of our research focusing on adolescents, and more recently we have expanded our age range into the older population.
Our business is to do research that addresses problems and tries to produce solutions that are contextually relevant. We have a very strong focus on strengthening academic capacity.
That goes through all levels. It's not just capacity building of researchers, but also capacity building of the research support.
We deliver research through early career researchers. It is inherently built into the science that we do.
One of the key ThruZim ethos is the passion to grow people and allow them to flourish in their careers.
What makes this place really unique is that there's a lot of support provided regardless of what stage you're in.
We've had a number of fellows funded through EDCTP to conduct research, and that feeds back into the country because our fellows conduct research and then end up mentoring their more junior colleagues. And it's a continuous pipeline which not only helps to deliver research, but it ensures that there's sustainability of the science that we do.
We have been able to build a community of people who love research, people who love Zimbabwe and are doing meaningful work.
Science is always a team effort, and it also requires different kinds of expertise. So we have health economists in our group, we have epidemiologists, we have statisticians, we have social scientists, we have multiple collaborations across universities. There's no point doing science unless it is going to have effected change or a benefit. That's the reason we do science.
What we've been able to do is directly translate the findings into policy and programs within Zimbabwe.
We are obviously thrilled to have won the prize, and it's really the whole team who has won the prize. And it is a recognition that we have not just achieved to deliver very high quality research, which also have informed policy and programming, but that we were able to upskill and capacity build a lot of early career researchers through that process. And it's really these early career researchers which we want to shine in that prize.
What the prize does is it really energizes the team because they take pride in knowing that they're internationally recognized. And that's a really big thing when you realize how difficult the circumstances are in which our colleagues work.
I'd like to take this opportunity to invite the people who have been in the film and others to receive the prize. I don't know you before, so I don't know who I should give this to. In mini mini mo.
We can all take it together.
Yeah, we'll all do that. Thank you.
Well done, well done.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief, and I usually don't speak with any kind of notes, but because I don't get awards very frequently, especially as a team, I need some little sheets. Good morning, everybody. My name is Katharina Kranzer, and I just briefly want to ask part of our team to introduce themselves, please.
Good morning, friends and colleagues. I'm Rashida Farand. I'm a professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and I direct the Health Research Unit in Zimbabwe, where I've been based for the last 20 years, and which I have the privilege of calling home now.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mandy Tembo. I am a postdoctoral research fellow and also the public engagement lead for the Health Research Unit in Zimbabwe.
Morning, everyone. My name is Nyasha Dzalakwa. I am a PhD student based in Zimbabwe, but I'm doing my PhD with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I'm also a study coordinator at the Health Research Unit Zimbabwe on one of the EDCTP funded trials called Vitality.
And Nyasha, you're not just study coordinator, you are the work package lead.
Yes, that's true.
So we at the Health Research Unit Zimbabwe, known as RUZIM, are really delighted to be awarded the Outstanding Research Team Prize by EDCTP. Thank you, EDCTP, for this recognition, but also for continuous funding, and most importantly, for ensuring that capacity development and networking is at the heart of projects and programs. At RUZIM, our vision is to create a fostering and enabling environment, research environment, with teamwork really at its core. And we have a very strong focus to support, mentor, and train early and mid-career researchers. And we are all delighted. This is not the only part of our team which is here. We have 4 PhD students here and 2 postdoctoral scientists who are celebrating with us with this prize and our achievements, but importantly are also going to present exciting scientific findings. We know that our colleagues both in Zimbabwe and in London, and all of our collaborators in Africa and Europe, will be celebrating this prize with us even if they are not here in Paris. And we want to thank them specifically for all of their support, for their enthusiasm not just into science, but also helping us to mentor Zimbabwean researchers, and for their scientific guidance. And importantly, as you have heard, we are a unit, but we are a unit based at an institution, and our home institution is the Biomedical Research and Training Institute in Harare, Zimbabwe. And we want to thank them for their continuous support and for hosting us. And also we would like to thank the Ministry of Health and Childcare in Zimbabwe, who has been collaborating with us and supported us for the last 20 years. Without BRTI and without the Ministry of Health, we would not have been able to do what we have been doing, we would not be able to do what we are currently doing, and we will definitely not be able to do what we are planning in the future. So thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. Wonderful congratulations from all of us. We are happy to celebrate with you. And I would like to say it's a wonderful, not team award, but also a wonderful women's team. And that is really very impressive. And this we have to particularly celebrate. And thank you very much, dear Hannah, for presenting this. And now you all need a little bit of sugar and coffee, but I think together with this plenary session, you are now really in full swing and motivated to go into the other sessions and really to move things forward in the spirit of your institutions and of EDCTP. So thank you very much. Everybody, enjoy the coffee and the program and everything.